There once was an old castle, a castle that stood in the middle of a deep, gloomy wood. And in the castle there lived an old fairy. Now this fairy could take any shape that she pleased. All the day long she flew about in the form of an owl, or crept about the country like a cat. But at night she always became an old woman again. When any young man came within 100 paces of her castle, he became quite fixed and could not move a step until she came and set him free, which she would not do until he gave her his word never to come there again. But when any pretty maiden came within that space, she changed into a bird, and the fairy put her into a cage and hung her up in the chamber in her castle. Why, there were 700 of these cages, all hanging in the castle, and all with a beautiful bird in each one of them. Now, there was once a maiden whose name was Jorinda. She was prettier than all the pretty girls that ever were seen before. And a shepherd lad whose name was Jorindel. He was very fond of her. They were soon to be married. Now one day they went to walk in the wood, that they might be alone. And Jorindel said, "We must take care that we do not go too near to the fairy's castle." It was a beautiful evening. The last rays of the setting sun shone through the bright, bright green leaves and long stems of the trees. And the turtle doves sang from the tall birch trees. Jorinda sat down to gaze upon the sun, and Jorindel sat by her side, and both felt so sad. They knew not why, but it seemed as if they were to be parted from one another forever. They had wandered a long way, and when they looked to see which way that they should go home, why, they found themselves at a loss as to what path to take. The sun, it was setting fast, and already half of its circle had sunk behind the hill. Jorindel, on a sudden, looked behind him and saw through the bushes that they had, without knowing it, they had sat down close under the old walls of a castle. Then he shrank for fear, turned pale, trembled. Jorinda was just singing, "The ring-dove sang from the willow spray, well-a-day, well-a-day. He mourned for the fate of his darling mate, well-a-day, well-a-day." When her song stopped suddenly, Jorindel turned to see the reason, and behind him, he beheld his Jorinda changed into a nightingale, so that her song ended with a mournful juk, 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 and an owl with fiery eyes flew 3 times round them, and 3 times screamed, "Too-hoo! Too-hoo! Too-hoo!" could not move. He stood fixed as a stone, and could neither weep, nor speak, nor stir hand nor foot. And now the sun went quite down, and the gloomy night came. The owl flew into the bush, and a moment after the old fairy came forth, pale and meager, with staring eyes, and a nose and chin that almost met one another. She mumbled something to herself. She seized the nightingale and went away with it in her hand. Poor Jorindel! Oh, poor Jorindel saw the nightingale was gone, but what could he do? He couldn't speak. He could not move from the spot where he stood. At last, the fairy came back and sang with a very hoarse voice, "Till the prisoner is fast, and her doom is cast, when the charm is around her, and the spell has bound her, hie away, away." All of a sudden, Jorindel found himself free, and then he fell to his knees before the fairy and prayed that her to give him back his dear Jorinda. But she just laughed at him and said that would never see her again. And then she went on her way. He prayed and he wept. He sorrowed, but all was in vain. "Alas," he said, "what will become of me?" He could not go back to his own home. Oh, so he went to a strange village, and he employed himself in keeping sheep. Many a time did he walk around and around, as near to the hated castle as he dared to go, but all was in vain. He heard or saw nothing of Jorinda. At last, he dreamt one night that he found a beautiful purple flower, and that in the middle of it lay a costly pearl. And he dreamt that he plucked the flower and went with it in his hand into the castle, and that everything he touched with it was disenchanted, and that there's where he found Jorinda again. In the morning, when he woke, he began to search over hill and dale for this pretty flower. And 8 long days he sought for it in vain. But on the 9th day, early in the morning, he found the beautiful purple flower, and in the middle was a large dewdrop as big as a costly pearl. Then he plucked the flower and set out and traveled day and night until he came again to the castle. He walked nearer than 100 paces to it, and yet he did not become fixed as before, but found that he could go quite close up to the door. Jorindel was very glad indeed to see this. Then he touched the door with the flower, and it sprang open. And with the flower, he stepped inside, and he went through the court, and he listened. And when he heard so many birds singing, he scarcely knew how to proceed. At last, though, he came to a chamber where the fairy sat, 700 birds singing in 700 cages. When he saw Jorindel, she was very angry. She screamed with rage, but she could not come within 2 yards of him, for the flower he held in his hand was his safeguard. He looked around at the birds, but alas, there were so many nightingales. How then should he find out which one was his Jorinda? While he was thinking what to do next, he saw the fairy had taken down one of the cages and was making the best of her way through the door with it. He flew, or maybe he just ran really fast after her. He touched the cage with the flower, and Jorinda stood before him and threw her arms around his neck, looking as beautiful as ever, as beautiful as when they walked together in the wood. Then he touched all the other birds, every single one. 700 cages full of birds, one at a time. He touched the cages. They all took their old forms again, and then he took Jorinda home, where they were married and lived happily ever after for so many years. And so did many a good lad whose maiden has been forced to sing in the old fairies' cages by themselves. Yes, they all found their maidens once again.